Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast may contain detailed spoilers. For spoiler-free reviews, be sure to check out our show on YouTube. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show.
Marty, whatever you do, don't go to 2020. I am Joe, as always, in my life preserver, and with me is my uncle, my uncle, Doc. David, how are you, brother?
I'm just fine, Marty.
And this is episode 168, and in this episode, I guess it's true, Spider-Man 3 is going to be a multiverse, and a lot of stuff is going on with that. We'll talk about it. The trailer for Season 3 of Cobra Kai came out. David and I will get our geek on. And then we're going back in time to 1985 for a classic. David and I will discuss Back to the Future. What's going on, my friend?
None much, my man. You know, little preview, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to tell you about it yet, though. But this episode got me a little frazzled because originally we were going to do like a mini review of a movie, but it affected me so much that I asked Joe, and we decided we're going to do a full review of it over Christmas. You know, that's the only hint we're going to give you about it. So it kind of messed me up for the day, for the podcast and everything like that. I'm like, oh my God, I still got to watch Back to the Future. And there's just a whole other thing. But anyway, hi, I'm doing good. I weirdly, I really wanted to actually talk about the other movie more than this movie, believe it or not.
I feel you. I'm anxious to talk about it. Today we'll talk about Back to the Future, and leaves us something to look forward to for Christmas. But for now, let's get to it.
Whatever life holds in store for me, I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility. This is my gift, my curse. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
So, let me give you the full cast list. Starring Tom Holland as Peter Parker's Spider-Man, Zendaya as MJ, Jacob Batalon as Ned Leeds, Marissa Tomei as May Parker, Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon / Electro, Benedict Cumberbatch as Dr. Stephen Strange, Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson, and yesterday, I'm not sure what the date was, Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, and Alfred Molina as Otto Octavius. Wow.
Yeah. I know we've said it before, and I guess I'll just say it again. We rely on Kevin Feige to do his thing, and he hasn't failed us yet. I'll simply say I'm of two minds on this. One is wildly nervous because I kind of feel like this could easily shape up to be just fan service. The movie, it could really turn to some silly schlock pretty quickly, and maybe people are just getting a little too excited because Spider-Verse, the animated Into the Spider-Verse, worked out so well. Maybe they're kind of feeling pretty emboldened that they can kind of pretty much do anything at this point. So I don't know. And I'm also I'm also mildly torn because I keep saying to myself, of all the characters to do this with, why Spider-Man? I suppose you could argue that the character of Spider-Man at this stage of the game, I mean, I remember, seeing the first trailer for the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man back in, I believe it was either 99 or 2000 because it was pre 9/11.
It was 2001. Summer 2001 was the first trailer for it because we all remember the big reveal shot in that first trailer.
Yeah. And we've had very consistent Spider-Man ever since. So, I mean, what was once to us like a day you'd never think you'd see Spider-Man on the big screen is now incredibly common. So with that in mind, I suppose they're kind of feeling like, well, let's do something radically different finally. To me, I still sort of struggle. I say, but I don't know. I kind of really wouldn't mind just a good old-fashioned Spider-Man, where he's just kind of a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man chilling out in New York City, catching bad guys, that kind of thing. I almost feel like they should kind of go the other way, where they stop with the over-the-top villains and kind of bring it down to, because, I read a lot of Spider-Man. I feel like if I had to really think back to my childhood reading comics, the one that I probably read the most was probably Spider-Man. I mean, he had at least back then 2 titles that I remember reading fairly consistently. I mean, he had Amazing Spider-Man and Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. So, yeah, and I kind of feel like most of that was, again, pretty low stakes stories, that again took place in New York. And so again, I am kind of torn with this sort of multiverse craziness Spider-Man, but again, I will simply say, look, Marvel has not steered me wrong yet, unless you want to include Captain Marvel. But I really do feel that, look, let them do their thing and relax, because again, they haven't steered us wrong. So all right, but I the voice in the back of my head is a little nervous.
I am very nervous, to be perfectly honest with you. This is a very big, complex story. And honestly, the only reason they could even do it with Spider-Man is because it's the only character that you have all these different universes that we've already seen. It makes sense. We don't actually have to, in a weird way, this is the perfect way to do it, because you don't have to set it up. There's nothing to set up, because everybody knows. Most of the audience knows Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker and knows Kirsten Dunst, knows. There's rumors that Tobey Maguire and Emma Stone are both being tapped to come into the movie as well. Not sure how they could do Emma Stone, though.
Well, I think most of the villains that you mentioned all died in their respective films. I mean, I guess they can just pluck anybody that they want.
I guess so. I at the slightest bit of optimism, only because I know that Feige is steering this ship, but there is so much that can go wrong with this. So I hope that Watts and McKenna and Summers and Feige all know what they're doing. That's John Watts, the director, Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, the writers who have written the first 2 Spider-Man movies, and of course, in Feige we trust. So,
yeah.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, the other side of the coin is like, it totally also gives a whole reason why, if need be, they could always just say, oh, and this is why Spider-Man is no longer in the Marvel Cinematic Universe when Sony decides they don't want to share their toys again.
Yeah, that is true. That is also very true. You never know what's going to go on with that. So why not kind of go for broke with this one? And I also sort of, it's funny, as you mentioned, Gwen Stacy, I kind of did say to myself, this does give them an opportunity to do a little retconning too, by the way. They can kind of do some stuff here. Like I was not at all a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 is sort of a textbook example of how not to make a movie. It was pretty terrible. So I kind of I'm saying to myself, they could actually go back in and do a few things with this. Maybe kind of give Gwen Stacy a little more, a little better treatment. I mean, I get that you wanted to do the Gwen Stacy moment where she dies, but it was only the second movie and it was not done well. So maybe this gives them a little playroom.
I thought I was doing the right thing, but I failed you.
The truth is, you got soft, and we paid the price.
You want Cobra Kai, it's yours.
The whole reason these kids got into trouble was because of us. We can't let them suffer because of our issues. The only way to end this is by working together. So, What do you say?
Joseph Darlington, my friend, my brother. Did you ever think that after Karate Kid 3, there would be an expansion on the Karate Kid story 20 years into the future? And did you think that not only would it be good, but it would be something that we'd look forward to so much that in my particular case, the trailer made me squee like a frickin' 5-year-old at a Wiggles concert or whatever the hell is the big thing right now.
And by the way, not that I want to make you feel old, but it was actually 30 years ago that we got Karate Kid 3. Listen, I saw the trailer and I just said to myself, I said, boy, this franchise, they know how to do nostalgia right. That's kind of my takeaway from this. It's like, boy, of all the things right now that are sort of trying to reboot, re-energize, reimagine, etc., and things that are just, we're getting 80s nostalgia in every kind of way, shape, or form. This one, boy, are they doing it right. And I've said it before. Every time I watch this show, I say, man, these people are geniuses. I mean, this show strikes the perfect chord where you're getting invested in the characters, yet there's a slight wink to the audience that a very meta kind of wink that we're all sort of in on this walk down nostalgia lane, yet somehow we are still very invested in the story, very invested in the characters. It's good writing. It is good storytelling. And honestly, all of this sort of fan servicey stuff just works so well. Honestly, by the time we got to the end of the trailer and we saw two very familiar faces, I was just like, what? I mean, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And honestly, I was already pretty sure where I thought the show was going to go, because I mean, they ended it up. The end of the last season ended with, there was a little hint that you'd see Elizabeth Shue's character. So I thought for sure that was where they were going to head. And they still might. I mean, they're probably, I'm sure they're not giving us all the surprises already in this one trailer. But just based on where they're headed with this, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be insane. I can't wait.
I am just completely, totally enamored by this show. It's going in directions that feel logical for the characters. It's expanding on the universe. It's giving us new and likable characters. 9 times out of 10, they do these next generation things and they shoehorn in these characters. It's like, oh, well, that's supposed to be the Johnny and that one's supposed to be the Danny. And so, but they didn't quite do that. They gave these characters depth and their own personality. So it's not really that cut and dry. They did a hell of a job with this show. And I am just losing my damn mind with excitement that January 8th couldn't come fast enough.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Bring this on.
Steven Spielberg presents Back to the Future, a Robert Zemeckis film. Marty leads an ordinary life.
No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
Yeah, well, history is going to change.
And 1985 is not his year. But Dr. Brown is about to change all that.
Are you telling me you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
Marty McFly, a 17-year-old high school student, is accidentally sent 30 years into the past in a time-traveling DeLorean invented by his close friend, the eccentric scientist Doc Brown. Written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Directed by Robert Zemeckis. Back to the Future. And of course, the eventual sequel to this, the Rick and Morty show, which totally ripped this movie off.
I said to myself, I know Dave's going to talk about that Rick and Morty show, and believe it or not, I've never seen one.
It's okay.
I hear people telling me all the time it's great and I should be watching it, but I've never gotten around to it.
That's okay. If you ever decide to, you know where it is. But yes, this was the summer of 1985. Some would say 1985 was one of the best years for 80s movies. Would you say that's accurate, Joe? 1985.
I would say so. And honestly, as you're saying that, it's like I think the only person in the world who didn't like this movie that year was Sylvester Stallone.
And why was that?
Because he had the other I think the top 3 films of 1985 box office wise was Back to the Future, Rambo First Blood Part 2, and Rocky 4. So yeah, I remember this one being like I think like Stallone would have dominated the top 2 spots that year had it not been for this one.
Other movies that came out that year were The Goonies, Silverado, Witness, a guilty pleasure of mine called Better Off Dead, Brewster's Millions, Out of Africa, Jagged Edge, another guilty pleasure of mine, Once Bitten. That was To Live and Die in L.A., The Purple Rose of Cairo. 85 was a hell of a year, man. A hell of a year. And this movie is like, it's like, how do I say this? When I was 16 when this movie came out, and forgive the crassness of this, okay? This movie is like I had been having consensual sexual partners for a couple of years now, and this movie was like finding the one. That one that, like, holy smokes, all that other shit was practice. This one is just right. This movie just hits me on every single level, in tone, story, character, screenplay, special effects. Some of the special effects didn't quite make it, but they hold up a hell of a lot better than a lot of movies have in the past. I love this movie. So I'm just going to come right out of the gate and say I love this movie. So there it is.
Yeah, listen, you are absolutely correct. And honestly, as I was rewatching, how do I say this? The only mildly frustrating thing I can think from my experience watching this just yesterday in preparation for this is I was really sort of hoping to dissect it for some little nuggets of imperfections to talk about, but quite frankly, I got nothing. Like you said, this is quite frankly a perfectly done film. I find that nothing. I mean, I don't find a wasted line of dialogue anywhere in this film. Everyone has a punchline, or it's got something that will factor in later, and it is delivered in a way that you don't see it coming. It's just, I mean, you talk about just the perfect screenplay. It has to be this movie. I mean, when you see this, I'm saying to myself, when you just saw this script on paper and you're reading it through, it's masterful. It is a masterfully done work. Yeah, I mean, you're correct that there are some special effects that, even at the time, I think were just one or two that were a little noticeable. But for the most part, I mean, it is pretty spot on, flawless, frankly. Everything about this film works. It's got heart. It's a film that it's the perfect type of a vehicle, because on the surface, what's it about? It's about time travel. What's it really about? Oh, it's about heart. It's about family. It's about him and his parents, the imperfect parents that he has, and kind of, no child ever sort of has this kind of experience where, your parents might tell you when like, how many times have we heard, when I was young, and like your brain just shuts off. Like you just shut right as soon as your parents ever started a sentence with, when I was your age, you never heard a word after that. Because you're like, whatever, don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, this really,
You heard it the first time. You heard it the first, maybe the second time, because it's new then. And then it's like, when I was your age, it's the third time. It's like, nope, don't care. Been there. I've never been in a car or driving with a boy.
Right. Right. So I mean, we hear these things growing up all the time. You never actually get the opportunity to go back and revisit that and say, oh, really? So, I mean, honestly, this was something that had never been done before. It was incredibly unique. So, yeah, I mean, it's just spot on perfect. It has the right balance of, again, heart and soul versus. And by the way, I can remember my brothers and I believe we saw all of them. And every single time I can remember in the car ride home, pulling apart the actual time travel part. If you went back and did this, would this really happen, or what would happen over here, et cetera, et cetera. Particularly in the other movies after this, but so yeah, I mean, I feel like I got so much enjoyment growing up from this film for the right reasons. I mean, and I will say this. I kind of forgot how much Huey Lewis was in this movie until I rewatched it again. I was like, oh, yeah, he didn't just do the one song. He's sort of all over this. He's got his fingerprints all over it. He's got two songs that play throughout. He shows up in one scene when Marty wakes up in his own bed. There's a big Huey Lewis poster in the background. So somebody liked Huey Lewis who made this movie. And so, yeah, I'll take a breath but I think this is going to be a gush fest because I'm hard pressed to find flaw with it.
Yeah, dude, I'm sorry too, because basically we're going to be sitting here talking about, hey, wasn't that cool? Wasn't that cool? Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. And we still got like 20 minutes left of the review. Whoops. Hey, for what it's worth, just you have to sometimes go through with us as we skip merrily through the hills of a wonderful movie, because that there's going to be sequels, and the sequels aren't going to be as strong as the first one. That's really where you're going for. So if you want to skip this from this point forward, we understand. That's fine. But try and stick around a little bit. Maybe we can, come up with some stuff that you didn't know. Hey, did you know that Michael J. Fox wasn't the first Marty McFly? Oh, of course you do.
And the footage actually exists, too.
I've seen it. It's freaky as hell.
It is kind of bizarre. Like, wow, they really literally, could you imagine being like how many weeks into shooting your film and they were like, you know what, this is not working. We're gonna get somebody else. Thank you. Goodbye. Here's your paycheck.
Seriously,
I mean, as long as you're getting paid, I guess whatever. But that is a pretty funny story.
Do you think he gets residuals? That's the one thing I couldn't find. Do you think that he might have had a deal in place that he gets residuals for the movie?
I don't think I'd be surprised, but good for him if he does.
I imagine I've gotten like most of the DVDs and stuff like that. And I imagine since it's not an official release of when you see his footage, it's not like in the DVDs and stuff like that. That makes me think, no, he probably doesn't get residuals. Because if he was getting residuals, he'd be like, yeah, show whatever the hell you want. But then again, I don't know. Eric Stoltz, in interviews, he comes off a little pretentious. So maybe that was part of the reason why it didn't. But yes, since we are talking about, let's talk about Mr. Michael J. Fox and Mr. Christopher Lloyd. Two people without whom this movie absolutely would not have worked.
Yeah, I agree. I tell you, yeah, that's another. I mean, we'll be talking throughout about all the reasons why the film works, but surely it has to also be the perfect casting.
Yes,
because
across the board.
I mean, this was Michael J. Fox's breakout role, frankly. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly, this was so early in his career that literally, I think half the reason why Eric Stoltz did so much filming was that they couldn't get Michael J. Fox because he was still doing Family Ties. Like, this is how far back this goes.
Yeah, he'd gotten stuck with the show, and they managed to work things around to get him to work it. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I mean, so yes. I mean, what a perfect. I mean, and he is. I mean, he's so perfect in this part. He's very. I mean, he's a good actor, anyways. I mean, there's not much I've seen him in that he's not good in. He's got a lot of charm and charisma. In fact, I think he is probably to this movie. My only comparison might be Bruce Willis in Die Hard. You know, just sort of the perfect breakout role for this person to sort of break into movies. And I suppose maybe I don't know if this is as true, but I think Christopher Lloyd probably this wasn't too long after his Taxi days. So I'm feeling like, yeah, I mean, but I know he's been in other things. So I guess it's not fair to call this his breakout movie by any stretch, but he has, you know, I think this has got to be his defining role. I mean, I can remember him in a few things. I even remember him playing Butch Cavendish in the Lone Ranger movie that I think probably nobody really liked except me.
I liked it. Move on.
There you go. So, I mean, again, I know he's been in things, but this certainly had to be his breakout thing. And the two of them together are just perfect. I mean, what perfect chemistry. And it's so funny, too, because, like, I've heard people... Like, it's one of those films where, like, years later, people will still sort of dissect it and break it down. And you'll hear people say, why would Marty be hanging out with this guy again? Like, why would they be friendly unless they had some other connection? But
I hate that cynical idea. Go on.
But it took you how many years before anybody even asked? Because they just sort of seemed to work together. So didn't need any explaining, frankly. So, you know, good for them. I mean, again, the film just sort of works.
By the way, my favorite previous role to this that he did, Mr. Christopher Lloyd, was John Big Booty in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
There you go.
Which is a movie we will have to tackle someday, but that's another story. But actually, I remember Christopher Lloyd from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Did you know that he was in that?
Yes, I did. Yes, thank you. Yes, and I now I feel very stupid for not remembering that. But and Danny DeVito as well. So his Taxi co-star, they work together. Yeah, there you go. Right. So shame on me for calling this his breakout role by any stretch.
This was the one that truly started his cinema career. These were mostly secondary characters. If you look at it, he was the guy whose butt got whose shoes went on fire in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In Going South, he was a deputy. In The Lady in Red, he was a hitman. Legend of Lone Ranger. Okay, that might have been his biggest part as Butch Cavendish at that point. The Salesman and Postman Always Rings Twice. Mr. Mom, Star Trek. There we go. Star Trek was probably like the first real big role for him. Where in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, where he played Commander Krug. But yeah, Back to the Future was it. And like he just went nuts after that, man. He had Back to the Future, he had Clue, he had Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 8 Men Out. He was in 8 Men Out, it seems. And then all the way up to 91, where he started playing Uncle Fester in The Addams Family. This guy has had an illustrious career. Nice guy, by the way. Met him once.
Really? Yeah. Oh, I think I saw the picture, didn't I?
Yep, Liam, with him and Biff. By the way, the guy who plays Biff, I want to give a shout out to him. I just want to say that Thomas F. Wilson, he may play a dick, but he's actually quite a warm guy in real life. Really, really funny, too.
Doc.
Marty, you made it.
Yeah.
Welcome to my latest experiment. This is the big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life.
Well, it's a DeLorean, right?
Bear with me, Marty. All your questions will be answered. Roll tape.
Okay,
and we'll proceed.
Doc, is that a Devo?
Never mind that now. Not now.
All right, I'm ready.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing on the parking lot at Twin Pines Mall. It's Saturday morning, October 26, 1985, 1:18 a.m. And this is temporal experiment number 1.
But yeah, you have him, you have Leah Thompson, you have the always strange Crispin Glover, who couldn't be bothered to come back for the sequels, which we'll get to. But honestly, seriously, like they're people talk all the time about how, you know, right now the only reason there's not new Back to the Future is because, you know, Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis are still alive. And it's like, that's great. It's nice to know. But even after they pass, how do you come even close to this? What are you going to do? You're going to make it about 2020? That's the only thing I could think of is, they're going to go back to 1985. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, kind of like what they did with freaking It. That's the only way you do it. Yeah. That's the only way they're gonna wind up doing it. It's going to screw everything up, but whatever. The entire conceit of the story, forget about the relationship, because this goes into that whole, if you have to sit there and analyze everything, you're just too goddamn bored. Okay, like there was this guy in the 60s who first suggested the idea that Batman and Robin was a homosexual relationship, and that's why Batman and Robin should be taken off the air. That's the whole reason why in the 60s Batman series Aunt Harriet is there.
Yeah, the ambiguously gay duo.
Exactly. Oh, great! Now that song is stuck in my head. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, I'm with you. This is the kind of film that really should never be touched again. They should never. Because you can reboot something like Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. You can reboot that to your heart's content, because that was a comic. That was another medium at some point. So you're not, you can. That's fair game, I think. This was a brand new, unique film that can never be duplicated. So I think you're just setting yourself up for failure if you try it. We were talking recently about we just mentioned how we just saw the new Cobra Kai trailer. Now that is something that is done in a different way. Like I feel like I could make the same argument for Karate Kid, but that's an argument for why the terrible remake with Jaden Smith is so terrible. Just don't even try it. It won't work. So yeah, I think Back to the Future, they should just leave it be. Yeah, don't ever try to do this again. It is quite literally, and quite literally magic in a bottle. It's lightning in a bottle. I feel like this, because of what this movie is about, I can kind of use literally, if that makes any sense. It's just the perfect concoction of different things that are working perfectly, and they should really never do it again.
I'll go one further. I think they should have never made sequels.
I kind of agree with that. Go ahead.
When I saw this movie, when it ended and the DeLorean flies up into the air, goes into the trees, turns around, and comes right into the camera before, traveling through time, the last words you see are directed by Robert Zemeckis. Not to be continued. That was added later. Much like Star Wars, much like A New Hope was added to the opening crawl of Star Wars later on.
Right.
And I am of the opinion now, granted, I like the sequels, and we're going to get to them. I don't love them like I love this movie. And a part of me feels like the sequels were more like Robert Zemeckis trying to come up with new technology for cinema, more than actually tell a good story. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. There are times where a movie is what a movie is. And this idea, this assertion that movies need to be trilogies is a misnomer. And I feel like, Star Wars got lucky in it. And even Star Wars didn't necessarily stick the landing when it did what it did. Okay. I have found that I have not found a quote unquote trilogy that has worked for me. Okay. There's always been something that didn't quite make it at the ends. They get close, but they don't do it. For every Return of the Jedi, which was close, you have your Godfather 3s, so bad, in fact, that frickin' Coppola is doing a new edit of it to try to save it. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's coming out in a couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for it. It's called the Death of Michael Corleone or something like that. Then there's The Dark Knight Rises, which, again, don't feel like it stuck the landing. But then again, I also had a problem there. And this movie, I think, just had too big a pair of shoes to fill. And I think that's the problem with cinema in itself. You shouldn't, unless you have specific plans or unless you have ideas, there's no reason to go any further with some plots. And I feel like this movie has the perfect beginning, middle, and end. It's like, we're going to go help our, your children. We've got to do something about your kids. Okay. Sure. I guess that can kind of sort of be an interesting, idea, but the execution of it winds up being crap. Which, again, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of the game. My point that I'm trying to say here is that this movie should stand on its own. You don't. I don't feel like you ever need to see the sequels. If you're curious, fine. But this is the movie you should watch. This is, if you ever want to do a movie about time travel, this is your template, your mecca, whatever. Okay? This is how it should be done. And you're never going to get better than that. And you can't recapture all the elements in this movie that worked perfectly.
Yeah, I completely agree. And honestly, it's funny. I'm trying to remember. I feel like there was another film that we talked about in the last year or so where I was comparing it to this one, where the ending ends on sort of just like a funny afterthought, and it's not really meant to be taken literally. Yet, sure enough, when they said, we got to make more of these, they felt like, oh no, we do have to take that literally now and go forward with the film based on that. So yes, I completely agree with you that it was really, like I said, not meant to be kind of a literal stepping off point for a franchise. It should have been just left alone as a funny thought. Yeah, I'm with you. This movie was perfectly self-contained. And honestly, it was a situation where they were never going to be able to live up to the standards that they set. Because, like you said, it's again, because this movie was the heart and soul. It's a personal journey. It's not simply a gimmick. It's not really about the time travel. The sequels, frankly, are very much about the time travel and not much else. And like you said, we'll get to that. And I'm not ripping the sequels because I think they're good movies. This one is the gem. This one is, again, the lightning in the bottle. This was just everything firing on all cylinders. Perfect. So yeah, it was a very tough act to follow.
I don't think you can. And I feel like half the problem with movies today, and even so much back then, is that when something hits, we've discussed it a couple of times, Hollywood learns the wrong lesson. Instead of they get money in their eyes and they feel like, okay, now let's cut this golden goose open and kill it, and I'm just, it's weird how this movie made me feel after watching it. It made me sad in a way that, there is no equivalent to this type of movie today that, tells a nice sci-fi story with compelling characters, great action, an incredible soundtrack. I'm going to throw that out there because it needs to be said.
Yes. Yeah.
There is no equal. Even the Marvel movies, as much as I love the Marvel movies, I watch this and I think to myself, how do I love the Marvel movies when I see something like this?
Yeah. It's funny, and I'm so glad you mentioned the score, because I meant to mention that as well. Because honestly, it's funny. It's, to me, that score is so amazing that I kind of feel like this was this was already a perfect film, but that score really, I mean, you can't not hear that in your head as you talk about it. For some reason, that score really did sort of bring this up to like a blockbuster level film, which can sit right next to any of the Marvel films we're talking about. I kind of feel like you had a score that sort of put it on par with a big movie like Star Wars or anything else. So yeah, that was pretty. See, I feel like if I was making this film, I kind of wonder if I would have been smart enough to say, yes, that's the score for me. Because maybe I would have been a little intimidated and thought like, oh, wow, are we setting the bar a little high by having a score that sounds like it's an epic film? I mean, it is kind of just it's about time travel, but it's really just sort of a family movie. Maybe I should, but no, the score is perfect. And honestly, had the film not been as good as it was, I'd be saying, boy, this score feels like it goes with a pretty epic film. But no, everything about it just works.
He's sending Marty 30 years back in time.
It works! It's a flying saucer from outer space!
Now, he's trapped in the past.
It's gotta be a dream.
About to meet
Chocolate.
his future father.
He's a peeping Tom.
Wow!
And he's making an impression on his mother.
He's an absolute dream. And he can sleep in my room.
Anything you do could have serious repercussions on future events.
Now, he's got to make his mother and father fall in love.
For crying out loud, I haven't even been born yet.
And only Dr. Brown can help him get back to the future.
Speaking of score, guess what?
Who's going first? I'll be shocked if we're not on exactly the same page here.
There are moments in cinema history, your Gone with the Winds, your Citizen Kane's, your Star Wars, your Jaws's. This movie easily fits in with each of those. They are the definers of their genre. They are the mountains that directors to this day try to climb. Maybe most millennials don't know half of those movies, but I can guarantee you that even the youngest whippersnapperish of a director has heard of these movies and wish to be as good as these movies are. Back to the Future is absolutely a defining movie. It is a defining movie of the 80s. It is a defining movie of its genre, of its story, of its characters, of everything. You can watch this movie. There will always be tiny little mistakes, absolutely positively tiny little mistakes. If you sit there and CinemaSins this movie, you'll find something, or you'll find something to nitpick. You want to be that type of person? Be my freaking guest. Be that cynical. You know, we live in a cynical world with cynical people. And I love that I live in a world that has a movie like this that is both joyful, hopeful, slightly tragic, poignant, beautiful, all wrapped up in one, in a time travel story. 10 out of 10.
Yes. 10 out of 10 for me as well. I think you summed it up pretty perfectly. This again, just a genius script, and it's we mentioned very briefly how they recast in the middle of it, because that to me is sort of shows just how I think they knew that they were sort of working with something that was close to perfection. When you know that the chemistry is just off enough that you need to recast, that tells you a lot. It's a perfect story. It really, like I said, there is not a line of dialogue that is wasted. It all works perfectly, blends perfectly. The final product is just spectacular. And honestly, I think it does live up to it holds up to scrutiny, frankly. I mentioned how we would talk about the ins and outs of time travel. I felt like there was so many things in this film that worked so well. I mean, again, like when you talk about how things work is, I mean, the only thing this film asks you to do is just accept that there is time travel in this universe, that yes, time travel is a thing. And once you sort of go with that, everything just, boy, does it all make sense and work. It makes its own rules, follows its own rules. I mean, it's just so good. So yeah, I literally can't find anything to rip apart in the film. I can't, not that I want to. I mean, but honestly, even just looking for things to talk about, to dissect a little bit, it's just flawless. So it's easily a 10. And, you know, again, I'm kind of excited to talk about the other films because I feel like then we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of what works and what doesn't. But this one, not easily a 10.
I don't have a Who Asked You either, my man. I agree with everything you just said. Absolutely.
I don't either. Yes, I have nothing. I literally have nothing.
As for for-year consideration, holy smokes! I mean, the show is a whole big for-year consideration. If you want to get crazy, but let's talk an outstanding screenplay. Let's talk the most amazing casting that you could have gotten for the time and the place. Let's talk excellent special effects. You know, settings. Let's talk the director, you know, Robert Zemeckis. This is Robert Zemeckis at the height of his power. And yet I am a real weird person. I was one of the few people that when I was younger, I used to love just listening to the soundtracks of movies. Everybody thought I was weird because I loved like the soundtrack to 1941. And here, I'm giving my for-year consideration to Mr. Alan Silvestri. This is an iconic score as Star Wars, Jaws, Gone with the Wind.
I have to tell you, again, I feel like I should probably try to find something else, but honestly, that was mine as well. I was really...
And that's okay, dude. That's okay.
But like you said, I mean, this whole show is one long for your consideration, but frankly, honestly, I felt the same way. I felt like, I mean, everything works. All the actors and actresses are working. Everything is perfect. And then all of a sudden you just have this other element that elevates it and it's like it lets you know that this film is that good. It took it to, I mean, I would put this, I mean, even though it's a light-hearted film, I'd put this film up there with some greats. You mentioned The Godfather. I mean, I feel like Lawrence of Arabia, frankly. This is, you know, it's just that good. So yes, I do also want to give it to the score. To it communicates to you, yes, this movie is as good as you think it is.
100% agreed.
Michael J. Fox.
Whoa, this is heavy.
Christopher Lloyd.
There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
Back to the Future.
Oh, that was a joy. That was a joy to watch and to talk about, to be perfectly honest with you.
Absolutely.
But I kind of gave a, preview of how I'm going to feel next week, maybe. I don't know. I have to rewatch it first before I can say for sure. But next week, ladies and gentlemen, oh boy. Hollywood does what Hollywood does and decides we need more. Give us more. And Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale try with Back to the Future 2.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I am kind of looking forward to that one and sort of cutting that up a little bit because again, this was a wildly tough act to follow and you can't recreate it. So what do you do for people who just kind of want more? And I'm kind of looking forward to that discussion.
Indeed. Excellent show as always, my man. It was nice to talk about this. It's that time of year where things are getting a little bit freaky, but you know what? This was nice. This was really nice.
Agreed. Well done, my friend. This was another good one, and like I said, I'm anxious to talk about the next one.
Yeah, me too. Good, bad, the ugly. You gotta do what you gotta do. Am I right?
Absolutely.
All right, man. You have yourself a great night. Great talking with you as always.
You too, my friend. Good one as always, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode. And be sure to check out the Reviews Without Remorse channel on YouTube for spoiler-free reviews of new releases. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You can find our page on patreon.com. As little as $1 a month goes a long way. All clips in this podcast are used for commentary and critique, and is considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
What happens to us in the future, Doc?
It's your kids, Marty. Something's got to be done about your kids.
What do you mean?
Your daughter marries a black man.
That's actually not a big deal for me.
Yeah, me neither.
What? What? You... Really?
Yeah, I mean, well, what's wrong with that?
Oh, no, nothing. It's nothing, I guess. I think it's great. Congratulations.
I don't think I'm comfortable around you anymore.
Did you know peanut butter was invented by a black man?
Too late, Doc.